Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in day to about Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 18 of 2025, and I just finished reading this issue, like, no less than, like, a minute or so ago, and I am just so hyped and so ready to talk about this absolutely amazing issue of Shonen Jump. Really, I had so many great laughs at manga this week, so many just, like, man Witch Watch, man Blue Box, man Akane Banashi, you all made me just go like, wow, that's so cool. Well, I guess that was more like Akane Banashi and like Ember, sort of like Blue Box and Witch Watch were much more on the like, my heart is beating so much and I'm just so happy for these characters being able to be in the spots they are in. We also just so many absolutely amazing chapters this week. Of course, I'm not going to ruin it here by talking about the stinker that was Astro Royale, but we will be talking about all of that whenever we get halfway through the video here, because I think we have, 14 series to talk about here this week, which really isn't a bad number whatsoever. Really, this number of 14 is where we have been averaging out here these past 2 weeks. I mean, if we look towards, like, the beginning of the year, we've had a 14 almost every week except for, 4 of them, and that was a few times. We had 13 in the 1 week that literally everything was on, so we had, 15 series, but 14 is really where we've been sort of, sticking around with, and honestly, we just had a lot of really good chapters to talk about, so I really just sort of want to just hop into this video just talking about all of the various manga we have here today. But of course, before we do that, I've got a few things I want to mention before. First off, Witch Watch has the magazine cover this week. It's this really nice little cover with both Morito and Nico surrounding sort of this little bit of a TV. Hey guys, post-production Glowplasma 231 here, and as you guys can clearly tell, I was just wrong here in this moment. Of course, as you see on screen, the actual banner of Weekly Shonen Jump this week, which was just Morito, Nico, and sort of like some biker gang outfit, sort of in a way. I think that's the best way to maybe explain it. I got a little bit tripped up here, being the issue number 19 has Luffy coming out of a TV set to commemorate the coming back of the One Piece anime back to Egghead after we had a little bit of a hiatus with some other animated stuff going on. I just simply got confused here, and that was that. But Witch Watch still does have this issue cover, of course, for the Witch Watch anime, but I was just a little off in my total basis there. My bad, guys. The Witch Watch anime series is finally debuting, which I'm honestly really excited about. The first episode has come out by the point that I'm recording this video. Granted, it came out more on the day whenever issue number 19 of Weekly Shonen Jump has actually released, being that I'm a week behind in doing all of this. My bad. So I haven't actually had time to watch first episode yet, but I honestly think I may do a series on the channel talking about the Witch Watch anime, because I just absolutely love Witch Watch. I love any series by Kento Shinohara, the manga, so I think I may do a few videos on that, so maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for, hey, this may be coming soon, but of course, first I need to get caught up on Weekly Shonen Jump and all of the other manga series that I currently do, right? And with that, we also need to talk about how we do this series here on the channel. Of course, I have read all 14 of these series in Weekly Shonen Jump this week, and in this video, I'm going to be going through and rambling, giving all my thoughts, and I'm like, hey, how was Kagurabachi? What I think of Kill Blue, Sid Craft, Astro Royale, Ultimate X's Kyoshi, pretty much rambling about all of these chapters, maybe going in a little bit more depth on some, not as much on some others, and then we'll be ranking these series from what I thought was the best series of the week all the way down to the worst series of the week and the other 12 spots in between, along with taking out my favorite character from manga this week and pretty much just saying hey, I really like this character right here, and that's sort of how we do this series. So yeah, really, without any further ado, I just want to go and hop into all this. First, starting off with Kagurabachi, and really, this is a very emotional chapter of Kagurabachi, because of course we did not have any Kagurabachi last week, but this chapter comes in and starts us off with more of the Samura flashback, right? As you pretty much go through this chapter, we do see that Kagurabachi has a color page. A little while ago, there's this whole sort of contestant thing, hey, submit all of these various sorcerers and Chihiro may go through and depose of all of them, and that's pretty much what we see this color page. It's a little cool to see hey, there were 925 entries received, and these were just the best sorcerers. I've got a full video on this Kagurabachi chapter already up on my YouTube channel, so I'll have that link down in the description down below, so you can go check out the Kagurabachi chapter number 73 of review, right? But getting into the chapter itself, like I mentioned here a second ago, we really delve deeper into the Samura and Iori flashback, as this chapter really builds on how the two of them were really interacting with each other and understanding how these characters sort of were working and coexisting in the same world. We see that Iori always tries to protect Samura from pretty much being burdened with the knowledge that she is getting bullied at school because of her dad is one of these contracted sword bears that's coming through and is hey, he killed a lot of people in the war, don't you know? Along with the whole idea there's a bunch of trash sprinkled around their house, right? There's a certain point later in this chapter where Iori has to just go hey, it's okay no matter what. She just like crying a bunch of tears here in a moment, just obviously showing that it's not okay at all. We also have to come to the fact that Samura doesn't really knows that him being around Iori isn't the best thing at the end of the day, as we just see a bunch of moments where, like, whenever she even talks about school, Samura is just outright afraid of it, like, hey, I think she's going to get bullied, but she says she's not, so maybe she doesn't, right? And we even see that one of the students from her school bullies her, and Samura literally goes up and, like, apologizes to the guy's dad, and the guy's dad's like, hey, no, you don't have to do this whatsoever, right? But Samura's just like, hey, I am so incredibly sorry, right? And the guy's like, no, I'm the one who's sorry. I'll straighten it out, right, Mr. Samura? And Samura's just like, no, don't do that at all. Like, it is my fault entirely, right? Really giving us the idea, like, yes, Samura does not believe that he is a hero whatsoever, right? We also see a little bit of a conversation with Yora and the Hat Shaku here in this chapter, really just going through, but like, hey, the Kabanagi buried all this stuff about the Seitai War, until we get to the end of the chapter, where all of this burden has just built up on Samura so much, and he's got this view of Iori, just like, he can't even open her room because he just sees all the blood on his hands, and everything that he knows about the Seitai War, and everything that he thinks that he's done wrong. And there's just this moment at the end of the chapter where he gets to call that, hey, Kunashige Rokuhira has been killed. And that's really where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi. Like I said, if you want to hear a lot more of my full thoughts on this chapter, I will have a video, or I already have a video up on the channel as we're uploaded like 2 weeks ago at the posting of this video, so go check out that video. It's a good one for sure. But Kagurabachi was an excellent chapter this week, right? One Piece is up next, and I don't know if I've ever read a One Piece chapter where it's more like, hey, chaos is happening so rampantly, so much around the world of One Piece. Like, really, of course, here we're just dealing with everything in Elbaf, but this is honestly a super complex One Piece chapter. I mean, while we only have it for like 15 pages, we cut to so many different scenes. We see so much different things happening. It's actually sort of crazy, right? Not to mention one of these pages is the cover story, right? So we really have 14 pages to do so much of this stuff, right? We open up the chapter as we see this really weird, like, mechanical structure almost. Frankie and Ripley, Ripley, that's what her name is. We see the two of them are sort of walking around, and they run into this thing, and Ripley explains, like, hey, we don't really know what this thing is. We see that both Lilith and Bonnie have made their way there, and they're like, hey, we got lost on the way. And I love Frankie just being like, hey, I guess even the genius can be bad at directions, right? It really reminds me of, like, yeah, that's definitely Zoro's whole thing, right? Either way, Lilith ends up saying, like, hey, this building seems to have been standing here for over 3 millennia. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy, right? And then as all this is happening, we see that they get attacked by one of the what I'm afraid of creatures, and this one is lightning, right? It's like this big storm cloud. It honestly reminds me a whole lot of Zeus here in a moment, but yeah, either way, it seems like they're getting attacked by that. We cut over to the western village where we see that a dragger is fighting all of them. I've honestly never heard of this creature before, but I really love Brooke's joke because, as we see, this is pretty much like a skeleton in like a warrior's outfit and everything. And Brooke is like, oh, that looks awfully familiar. Is that an enormous meat? It's a bit of a funny joke there that I like. We see that Colin, of course, the child of both Ripley and Scopper Gabon, is very much like, hey, I'm a warrior, I really want to fight this thing, but a bunch of these people just, like, absolutely aren't letting him fight whatsoever. All of the Straw Hats go over and talk to Gerald, pretty much letting him know, like, hey, there were these intruders in the higher castle earlier, and Gerald's like, all right, let's send out a message to everybody. A little bit of banter about how they're going to send over that message, but either way. And eventually the Straw Hats here come to a consensus like, hey, we need to go off and we need to search for whoever these few human-sized people are, because it seems like they were probably the ones causing all of this distress here on the island. But like, hey, if all of them are fighting, it's going to be easier for all of us to go off on their own. And they eventually see that Colin is going over and pretty much getting on a mini pirate ship that flies through the sky to go and fight into battle. And all the Straw Hats are like, hey, you mind if we join you? And Colin's like, hey, man the oars, the Colin pirates. And they sort of ride off into the sky. Really, my favorite part of this chapter is whenever we also cut over to Gunko and all of the other Holy Knights, as we see that Gunko is just listening to some music on her headphones, right? As we see that all over the island of Elbaf, there's been this thing saying like, hey, message to all of the Sun World, humans unrelated to the Straw Hat crew have been spotted at Altruss Castle. They have demonstrated overt hostility aren't considered, right? And all of this various stuff is going on. We see that Somer's killing Ham, and all of them are just having this general discussion. And eventually, they all start to talk about the music that Gunko is listening to, right? And we even see that Somer's like, oh, you're listening to a musical performance? Like, I prefer listening to a live musical performance. And whoever flubs a note first, and sort of motions like, bang, I just kill him there on the spot, right? But Gunko's like, hey, it's really nice to have a hobby that you can carry around with you, right? And she's just like, hey, I just really like this song. Killingham's like, hey, what's the song that you like so much? And she says it is called New World. At first, whenever I read this, I'm like, oh, wait, is that the song from One Piece film Red that Uda sings? I'm like, no, that's New Genesis. I should know this, right? It's my favorite One Piece property of all time, One Piece film Red. I'm like, I'm a big fanboy of that movie, so it's like, I should have known that, right? But she calls it New World, so I wonder if this is going to have any, like, power in the story, I guess I'll say, right? Hey guys, post-production Glowplasma 231 here, back once again. Gunko, the song she's listening to, New World, is actually a song by Soul King Brook, whatever he was doing all of his musical performance stuff. At the time, I did not realize this. I've been enlightened on it since I recorded this video, like, almost 5 days ago at this point, so I've had a little time to, like, sit here and think about it, and honestly, New World is such, like, a groovy and funky and just weird revolutionary song, so I find it really interesting that Gunko is listening to this, and I can't wait to see what impact it has on the various story at hand. So, pretty cool stuff we get here, right? But either way, they have a little bit more debate about all of this various stuff. As we see that Saul goes over and tries to stop all of these school children from moving, he fails in a few ways, and him and Robin try to figure out how they're going to be doing all of this, and then they get attacked by another one of the what I'm afraid of creatures, being Fenrir, as eventually we go back over to the Western Village, where we see that Nidhogger and a ghost have now appeared to also fight all of them. But finally, Dory and Broggy are here, and they come through and completely destroy both of these two creatures, as everybody's like, whoa, look at that, the giant pirates are here now, right? And we also see that Mr. Ya is also on the ship, so it's like, wow, this ship is unstoppable. And that's where we end this chapter of One Piece. A lot of really awesome and really cool stuff going on in this chapter. Definitely a good one for sure, but like I said, all of those shifting perspectives, it really makes it seem like that chapter is longer than actually being like 14 pages, right? Each of which was another fantastic chapters. Of course, we start off the chapter with, of course, like, hey, Gokuraku had just come into Princess Richia's room, and we learned that the two of them were related, with Richia being Gokuraku's elder sister, right? There's a little bit of a talk between them, as Richia's very much like, hey, Gokuraku, you haven't come home in a while, like, are you eating properly? And I love how Gokuraku's just like, yes, elder sister, lizards and bats and stuff like that. She's like, well, what are you talking about? Gokuraku's like, I'm kidding. She's like, okay, right? But she pretty much just is like, hey, it's good to know that, I don't really know what you're up to, but it's good to know that you're happy and healthy. That's all right, right? Shane's motions over to the window. It's like, who is that kid sitting there? Of course, it's Ichi, as we all know. And Gokuraku's like, oh, I guess he's just a collaborator, I guess. And Reach is pretty much very happy. She says like, oh, are you his friend? And Gokuraku and Ichi are very much like, are we friends? And like Richa just says like, hey, I know how to tell if you're friends. She's like, hey, have you guys ever played together? And both Ichi and Gokuraku think about skinning one of the fish they caught earlier, and they're just like, well, I guess we sort of are, right? They're like, have you eaten together? And two of them just think like, well, we ate that fish from earlier, right? And then she's like, hey, have you talked about your dreams together? And Gokuraku just thinks like, well, after we cut up the fish, ate it, and then we were talking about, like, I want some help acquiring Bakugami, and he just says out loud, like, I mean, we talked about the things we want to do, right? And we just see that Reach is just like, all right, that's awesome, because that means you're friends, right? They have this massive debate about, like, how Reach says, like, hey, in the past, Gokuraku was, like, so tied up in all of his magical, or in magic items, that he really didn't get out there and make too many friends. And Ichi also says, like, hey, I didn't have a lot of friends, but I get family. I've made a new family just recently. And of course, the two people who understand how family works are just like, is this kid sane? But he pretty much just explains Deathcross in, like, the worst way, saying, like, hey, she's mean, snarky, and arrogant, and loves to trick all of these people, right? As we see the three of them sing together, just have a very nice time laughing and talking all together, right? Well, eventually we see that they just start to generally just talking about all this other stuff, right? As we see that Princess Richia has brought out a book of a bunch of photos and all this various stuff, right? And she points out one in specific, which is her and Gokuraku's mother. And she says that she died 10 years ago, but she says it with a smile on her face, right? And she's just like, oh, I'm terribly sorry to hear about that, right? But Richia pretty much is like, hey, it's okay. That was all in the past, and now I'm not sad about it in the least, right? And hearing this, Gokuraku just gets up and storms out of the room. And as he's walking away, Princess Richia just says like, hey, the ceremony for Lord Bakugami is here in like 3 days. Can you please come to it, Gokuraku? And Gokuraku's like, well, I may be there later, right? And as he starts to walk away, he eventually just turns to Princess Richia and just says like, hey, and I don't know what you're talking about of. In 3 days is not the anniversary of Bakugami coming here to the town, right? It'll be 10 years since Mother died. And he pretty much just like storms off at that point, right? As you see that Gokuraku pretty much explains all this, like, hey, whenever they were young, Princess Richia was pretty much a massive crybaby. Like, she would always cry about all the things, dig graves for a bunch of animals and all of that. But she loved her mother more than anyone else. And whenever she died, she wasn't very happy about it, right? But what she did was she found Lord Bakugami, as Gokuraku just explains, like, hey, what Bakugami takes isn't people's sadness. Oh no, it's not that cute. It sucks out your ability to be sad. There's no way that thing is a god. I made a vow when I grafted these magic items onto myself. I swore I was going to punch that bastard magic right in the face and steal my sister's emotions back, right? And he's like, hey, I'll do whatever it takes to. So, Ichan, I'm sorry, but there's no backing out now. Run, and I'll kill you. As a reflector, we get this affirmation of like, hey, this is what Gokuraku's goals really are. We now understand his connection to Richia, so really why he is doing all of this stuff. And then he follows that up by threatening Ichi, pretty much just being like, hey, if you don't help me out, I will just kill you. Like, you are going to help me out. There's like no getting around it. And eventually Ichi just says like, hey, I don't care. I'm going to help you for sure, because right now I want to do something for you. I really want to help you, Gokuraku, right? Like, hey, use me as much as you need. And that's where we end off this chapter of Ichi the Witch, which, man, really good chapter of this series, too. There's going to be a really hard part at the end of this video, having to go through and ranking all of these chapters, because we just had so many good ones, right? Kill Blue is up next, and really, to put this chapter simply, it's all about, like, hey, Ogami has to become a club president to get to all of his goals in the future, and the Home Ec Club learns about this and pretty much is like, oh, so you're after Kapo's spot. I didn't really think that was what he was going after, but it sort of seems like the logical progression, I guess, in the series. So eventually a bunch of the Home Ec people are like, hey, let's have a little bit of a best of 3 competition, and we'll see if you are worthy to have what it takes to rule the Home Ec Club, right? We see the first competition is a little bit of a sewing competition, and Ogami is feeling decently confident. He's like, hey, it seems like we're going to have this and maybe like a cooking competition, all of this stuff later, but hey, if I can end up winning out in this competition, I may have an edge at beating Kapo and possibly being able to ascend to the leader of the Home Ec Club, right? But of course, we see that she just absolutely dominates him. And we see that, like, the way you win this challenge is by creating a outfit for Norin to wear. Ogami creates, like, this really old-timey, like, elementary schooler outfit, right? And we see that what Kapo ends up creating is a wedding dress, and everybody's like, whoa, that's so good, right? And like, you did so great, Kapo. And Kapo's just like, hey, Ogami, it doesn't matter what you are, but you're never going to be a master at your craft, right? And that's where we end this chapter of Ogami being like, all right, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was. It was a decent enough chapter of Kill Blue, but like, not one of my favorites for sure, right? Sidcraft Love is a Mystery was one that definitely got a massive smile after me, as let me just open up the chapter here real quick if my computer will work. Yeah, this is a very nice chapter, all focusing around, of course, Lulu Chantelars. We open it up on the Kitten Orphanage, where we see is a place that Lulu often comes to do all of her generous donations. Of course, she is the Phantom Thief Miscap, also known as Robin Hood, right? But because of this, like, she steals from all of the rich pretty much, and gives it to all of the poor. And we see that one of her favorite spots to come donate to is this orphanage here, right? And we see that she's just going around and like, hey, I need to drop off this bag of money for all these people put in like a very just like unconspicuous spot, and then like have all of them just reap the benefits from it, right? She's like, I don't know why I didn't come here during night, because like it'd be so much easier. And of course, as she's walking around, who else would she run into but none other than Sid Kraft himself, right? The two of them have this little bit of an interaction, and Sid's just like, oh, what are you doing here, Lulu? And she's like, I'm just here hanging out, right? And Sid's like, oh, well, I'm actually here. I've heard this place, this orphanage often receives donations from an individual who might be the Phantom Thief Miss Cat, so I was hoping to gather some information on them, right? And I really love that Lulu, who had this bag of money in her hand, is now hiding it behind her back, like, well, right? But we see all the orphanage children finally appear, and they all come around and swarm around Lulu, right? And we pretty much understand, like, in the past, she's dropped off money here so many times, and she's inadvertently gotten really close to all the people to sort of try to hold her cover, but she's actually gotten very fond of all of these children to begin with, right? And they're all like, oh, who are you, Sid? And Sid pretty much explains like, hey, I am a detective, right? And all the kids then get in like these fighting poses and are like, hey, we don't like all of this. And they pretty much say like, hey, if you're here to look for info about Phantom Thief Miss Cat, the person we owe everything to, right? And they say like, hey, as the Miss Cat fan club, we'll make sure that you pay dearly, right? And Sid and Lulu are both sort of like very overwhelmed by all of this, as the two of them are just like talking to each other. But Sid says like, hey, well, you see, I actually like Miss Cat too. And they're all like, whoa, you really do, right? And he's like, hey, and one dude's like, oh, so if you do, name her last three capers. And Sid pretty much says like, hey, it was, he just names the three of them. I'm not going to go out there and say all the names. But really at this point, we just see like they're having a little bit of a competition. Like, hey, we're going to play hide and seek. If you really respect Phantom Thief Miss Cat, then you should be able to pretty much be pretty good at hide and seek, right? It makes a lot of sense for like a 5th grader or whatever this kid is, right? Or not even a 5th grader, like a 5-year-old is more what I meant to say, right? So you see that Lulu and Sid actually end up hiding in around the same position, and they start to like talk to each other. And of course, they just say it out loud. They start talking about all this stuff out loud. And Sid's just like, hey, is it love? And Lulu's like, what are you talking about? Sid just says like, hey, I mean, they're so cute, all of those darn kids, right? And it's like, hey, I'm sorry for being blunt, but it's just, I've never seen you make a face like that before. And Lulu's all very much like, huh? What are you talking about? A strange face? The kid ends up finding them because, like, they're being really loud, just sitting there going over all of this stuff, right? At this point, we meet the orphanage director named Tabitha Basila, right? And she pretty much makes the mistake of saying, like, oh, you two are together, right? Well, that means you must be boyfriend and girlfriend, right? And asks them for a favor to pretty much help all of these students go to sleep, right? Or all of the orphans go to sleep. The two of them are sort of like laying together into bed on either side of all of these kids. And we even see it, Sid's just like, what is all of this? And we understand again, like, he thinks that Lulu is Elio's girlfriend. Of course, this is a misunderstanding, but it sort of is what it is then, right? And one of the girls, Nia, just says like, hey, lying with you two like this, it's almost like you're my real mom and dad. As Lulu just says like, oh yes, Nia, you have your mom and dad right by your side, so go ahead and rest, right? As she's like, oh, that's so very nice. As time passes a little bit, as Lulu also falls asleep with some of the kids, right? Nia is still up, and Sid's just like, hey, Nia, do you mind if I ask you something? She's like, yeah, you can. What is it, right? Pretty much, we also learned early in the chapter that one of these kids named Ted lost one of his badges or something, and Sid's obviously deduces like, hey, Nia did it, and pretty much asks her why she did it, and Nia pretty much just says like, hey, I want to be seen by him more, right? And I wish that he would give me a little more attention, right? And Sid eventually just says like, hey, I understand you were trying to emulate Phantom Thief Miss Cat, but that's the furthest from what Miss Cat's conduct is. Of course, regardless, whether it's good or bad, I'm sure the reason why she steals isn't to flaunt her skills or to gain people's affection. I think it's to deliver smiles to people in distress. And of course, Lulu is awake at this point to hear this really nice message from Sid. Cut to later in the chapter, Nia gives back this little badge and pretty much just says like, hey, I get very lonely, so will you look at me more, Ted? And Ted's just like, oh, sure, whatever. Sid has this very big thing of like, man, it's just pure romance, right? But eventually, Sid and Lulu start to walk on their way, as Sid just says like, I mean, In the end, I just find myself puzzled. I mean, there are indeed people who have been brought smiles by Phantom Thief Miss Cat's deeds, but it's also true that stealing is something not to be condoned, right? And he just says, like, hey, bringing smiles to people and not being able to reveal that you did must be a very lonely path. As Lulu just says, like, hey, well, I'm sure if you keep giving her attention as you have been, she won't be lonely at all, Mr. Detective, right? Because, of course, that's how she feels at the end of the day. And that is where we end this chapter of Sid Crafts. Of course, we have a little gag where Lulu's like, man, I forgot to put my bag of money back there, but is what it is. This was a very awesome chapter of Sid Craft. It was just good, what can I say, right? Embers is up next, and really the whole point of this chapter is to really just introduce a few various characters. Of course, we see that I forget what this school is called, we get the name in this chapter. It is Kosei University affiliated, which is of course where Haitani and all of them are going to. I'm sure at some point they're going to get a more unique name than Kosei University affiliated, but of course they're going against Iba Seryu, right? We get introduced to Iba Seryu Center Forward. His name is Gojzada Kaneda, and we see that he's got a little bit of a rapport with like Captain Bugai and a few of these other characters. And we pretty much see like he is a massive wall. Haitani accidentally knocks him over whenever he's trying to be big and imposing, and really gets into Haitani's face, which makes Haitani be like, hey, I want to get in your face now. And eventually, we also get introduced to, at the end of this chapter, Yuzin Nerima. Of course, we got introduced to this name last chapter, like, hey, this guy's like the pinnacle of all of these sports. But we see that as a Haitani and all these other characters are playing in a match. We see that Korobayashi High School, who was in our team, but we heard is like a really big deal, that of course Yuzin Nerima is on. We see that a few of them, one of this guy's comrades comes up and says like, hey, it looks like this will be a pretty tough first round match. That said, Kosei affiliated definitely is heavily favored here, and he's like, hey, what are they doing watching some random first round match? Like, which team do you think will win, right? And he's like, hey, what do you think, Nerima? And we see that Nerima is just sitting here solving a Rubik's Cube, right? And he just says like, well, when I get taiyaki fish pastries, I like the head first, not the tail. And the other players just like, hey, what are you talking about? Like, hey, coach is always getting on your case. At least try to pretend to be interested, right? And Nerima just is like, and where's the coach now? And pretty much just other players just is like, oh, they're down there. As we see it, they are sort of drafted in some shadow. As this guy just says like, hey, right up on the edge of the sidelines. That said, there's a player he was curious about here. And he's like, oh, what was his name again? And Nerima just says like, hey, if you don't remember, that's fine. I don't care. It doesn't matter who we play. To me, they are all the same. And that is where we end this chapter of Embers. Earlier in the chapter, I didn't mention it, but there's this whole little idea where Haitani overheard a conversation between Yukizuki and Bugai about him possibly being an offensive player too. And it seems like this is all also going to be going to Haitani's head, as we even see that later on, he sort of says like, hey, I'm going to be a star on both offense and defense and leave you flailing around in the mud. And Bugai sort of looks at him like, what is he talking about? But with all that out of the way, this chapter of Embers was a really good one that I definitely enjoyed. Embers, I'm just really loving this series, and that's for sure. And if we want to talk about a series that I am very much enjoying, we need to talk about Star of Beethoven, because this was the most random and crazy chapter I have ever read. Like, for a manga that's all about music, supposedly, this chapter just goes literally everywhere, right? At the beginning of this chapter, there's a little bit of a joke wherever Ichiro's just like, okay, Beethoven, I can't take it anymore. Don't push me any further. And Beethoven's like, is that so? We've reached the limit for what you are capable of. And we see that Ichiro's like, no, I'm not talking about the piano or anything. What I'm talking about is the fact that I've asked you several times to clean this room up. As we see the entire room around where Beethoven is sitting, of course, Ichiro's like living room is a complete mess. As Beethoven just is like, hey, listen, Yuso, every person has strengths and weaknesses. This is a consequence of my brain being too full with artistic talent, right? And Ichiro's just like, what are you talking about, right? Eventually, there is a little bit of a knock on Ichiro's door, as we see that it is none other than Amano, who is apparently one of Ichiro's friends from the school he currently goes to, right? And honestly, I really like Amano's design. I just think it's really neat. What can I say? I just like this kind of character design. I think it's pretty cool, right? We see that Amano and Ichiro go out to the park, sort of talk for a little while, and pretty much Ichiro just says, like, hey, I'm going to a new school, it's Rero Academy, and Amano doesn't seem very happy about all of this. Like, it seems like they are very, very close at school, right? And eventually she asks him, like, hey, why are you suddenly playing the piano again, Ichiro? And Ichiro's like, what are you talking about? As Amano just says, like, hey, is it for someone? Are you trying to improve? Or is it just for fun? And she says, like, hey, and this time, what sort of pianist are you starting, or what kind of pianist are you hoping to become? And it's just like, I really love the panel that we get here on page 9 where like she sort of like hops up on a park bench and asks him that. Like, it just looks really, really neat. But eventually she just sort of like runs off to go somewhere. And she's like, why did she look like so incredibly concerned? And for that matter, and like, I wonder why she didn't ask about that composition she wanted me to play. Don't really know if we know what all that's about, right? Eventually, we cut back over to Chicago, Illinois, which is, of course, where we ended off last chapter, as we see these two pretty much like secret agent characters who we met last time. We understand that one of their names is Lexi and that the other one's is Marcia. We see the two of them have just gone through and pretty much beat up a bunch of these various people. As we see that Lexi's just saying like, well, it looks like this place was a bust too. As we see that Marcia just says like, hey, I mean, yes, Lexi, it certainly does. As a little bit of a ring at the door just says like, good evening, Uber Eats here with, and pretty much Marcia's like, hey, can you stop ordering Uber Eats to like where we're like doing our raid locations at, Lexi? And he like doesn't even care, right? Well, they're eating their little bit of a meal, and they're sort of just talking to each other about all this various stuff, and he's like, hey, listen, Marcia, isn't it clear at this point that all of this intel is like a load of crap, right? And she's just like, hey, it is certainly clear that it's been a fool's errand so far. And while that's true, our next lead looks pretty promising, as we see that whenever Beethoven went through and was playing the piano with Ichiro there, I forget where this was, it was like in the first chapter or whatever it was, we see that some bystanders sort of like took a photo of this and like posted it online, and we see that Lexi's like, hey, a social media post from Japan like that guy on the left. Marcia pretty much explains like, hey, this seems like who we're going to, and we pretty much see Lexi's like, hey, do you think it's actually him? She just says like, hey, if it is, then it sure goes a long way towards making me believe that the stories about the ring that resurrects the dead are true. And Lexi's like, oh, I mean, the thing that gets me, though, is why is it Beethoven of all people, right? As Lexi pretty much explains, like, hey, when Beethoven died in 1827, his estate passed to his nephew, Carl. Many of Beethoven's belongings were sold at an auction. The inventory of his possessions lists a diamond ring. It was recorded as being sold for 90 florins. The odd part is that certain people believed the ring had black magical properties and started keeping track of its whereabouts. Because of their efforts, we learned the ring was in possession of an antique dealer named Franz Meyer around the year 1940. After the war, Franz came to America and set up shop here, but his story ended in bankruptcy. Our attempts to trace Franz's movements in America led us to nothing but small-time thugs and run-down slums like this one. But now we finally have something to back up the rumors. Franz had a daughter, and during the Second World War, she defected to Japan, and she settled in the same town where this picture was taken. And Lexi's just like, so you're saying that Franz gave her the ring, huh? Or maybe she swiped it. Like, either way, it works for me. I was getting sort of sick of eating burgers here all the time anyway, right? As Marcia's like, hey, then it's settled. Our next destination is Japan. And that is where we end this chapter of Star of Beethoven. I can tell you, going into this chapter, I did not expect to be coming out of it with a necromancy plotline in a manga about pianists and Beethoven coming back from the dead. Whenever you put it that way, maybe the necromancy plotline does make sense, but either way, this chapter was just funny on so many levels. I was sitting down reading this chapter, and I literally had like a good 5-minute laugh at the whole idea of like, hey, necromancy is part of this story now, along with going into this whole idea that it's like, hey, we have this whole story about like, hey, he's got this diamond ring that gets passed over all of these places. His daughter defected to Japan in World War II, and that's where we are now. It's just such a crazy, like, length of events just to jump through. And Star of Beethoven, for the sheer comedy you had me going through this week, just cackling in my seat, good chapter for sure. Alright, and we are back. I had to take a little bit of a break there in between the Star of Beethoven and now Astro Royale segments, and I didn't realize I'd been talking for 35 minutes straight already, so I may need to take a little bit of a backseat here and speed through a few more of these chapters, but thankfully, the next chapter is Astro Royale, which is pretty simple. Hibaru beats Shikaba. That's really all there is to it. There's not really too much else interesting happening in this chapter. There's a little bit of a flashback with the Yotsurugi family father, pretty much, and all of that. And him pretty much being like, hey, Shibaka, or whatever his name is, protect Hibaru for me. And he's like, you know what, maybe I will. And the very end of the chapter is Tendo coming down and holding the Daybreak Ore in his hand, pretty much being like, hey, this isn't over yet. And that's what Astro Royale was. As normal, I hate to do it, but it is definitely going on the bottom, right? Hima-ten is up next, and this is a decently nice chapter, really revolving around both Himari and Kanai, right? Definitely no Kana in this chapter. I guess she's had too much relevance recently, which is sort of is what it is. Really, this whole chapter is about Iamori ending up going to cram school with Hanoka, right? And he's on the phone with Himari at the beginning of this chapter being like, hey, I won't be able to be your house cleaner for a little while because I'm going to be going to cram school with Kanai. Really, the entirety of cram school gets blown past in this chapter, as you pretty much see, hey, Kanai is in a ponytail, and Imori is like, whoa, she looks so cool, and I really like when Imori is like, hey, it's too powerful, I won't be able to focus, right? A little bit of a funny joke there. Either way, you see that Mayu is also at this cram school, and she pretty much, puts in the Iamori's head that there's a bunch of boys here who are all sort of infatuated with Kanai, and there's a running joke through this chapter where they're all like, who is that guy sitting with Kanai up there? And it's like, oh, okay, guys, whatever, right? But we just really get a nice chapter going based on all of these characters, right? And eventually, narration says, hey, with Kanai's help, the week of our summer course went by in a flash. As we see that Iamori and Kanai are going home on the final day and are getting ready to hop onto a train. Iamori's like, hey, I had no idea what I was doing. I'm gonna be real with you. And he's like, hey, whatever we've learned in class before, that was on a whole nother level, right? And eventually, they're just sort of talking with each other, and they talk about college and all of that various stuff, right? And eventually, Kanai just says, hey, even if you say I may be very popular in college, here's the thing. I like being average. If my crush tells me that I'm cute, that's enough for me. And she's like, hey, just theoretically and all of that various stuff, right? And Iamori just thinks, of course, Himari pushing him to talk with Kanai more. And eventually, he just says, hey, you've always been cute, Kanai. I'm sure that anyone can see it, especially me. And of course, she's like, what is all of this, right? The hair manga at its finest, right? And eventually, the whole idea is Maya comes at the end of the chapter and being like, hey, it seems like you two are doing really good, right? Just hey, how about we all go see the fireworks show happening tomorrow, right? And both the two of them are like, whoa, what are you talking about? And Kanai just says, I mean, sure, I'll go, but, what about you, Iamori, right? And Maya's like, hey, it is the last big fireworks event of the summer in Tokyo, right? And Iamori just thinks back to, of course, Yoshino being like, hey, let's do this together, and Iamori's like, what do I do? And that's where we end this chapter of Hima-ten. A bit of a nice one, if not a simple one at the end of the day. We're going to put it right around here. Ultimate Excess Kyoshi is up next, and again, this is a very straightforward chapter. It's hey, Kogane Korokora, or Kyoka Kurogane. Yes, I think her name was Kyoka Kurogane. That sounds more correct in the moment, right? This is a chapter all about her beating the 4th Demon Lord, Gorgon Maid, right? Before we get to all of that, we see, of course, Sasaki is fighting off against the Demon Lord, Mukurojima, right? The two of them are going back and forth, trading all of these blows. I really love there's a moment when Sasaki is coming through and he starts to aim for Mukurojima's head, but Mukurojima pretty much just, pops his skeleton head off of his body and, just pulls it up and just says, hey, now let's not rush things, and he pretty much fires a Sero from Bleach at Sasaki. Saki's able to dodge all of this, but as the moment he's going to attack Mukurojima again, Yuta comes and intervenes, right? And both Sasaki and Yuta have this little bit of a conversation, hey, I'm gonna bring you back, and Yuta's like, what are you talking about? You're gonna die today, Sasaki. At this point, we get over to all of the stuff with Kyoka and Gorgon Mayday. As you just see that they're pretty much doing all of this, we see that Gorgon's main power is hey, they are a Medusa in all various ways, so they have the power to turn people into dolls whenever they view their own eye, right? And Mayday pretty much says, like, hey, filling my room with dolls that used to be humans is my one true passion. And you, Kyoka, you'll make doll number 1000, right? And Kyoka's like, oh, what an awful hobby. We see that she uses an ability called Gong Girl, which I think is a reference to the movie Gone Girl, being to, like, hey, this is a series that had, like, a bunch of movie references in it at the same time. She uses this power, goes through, and see that it pretty much, like, amplifies her body in all of these means that she sort of, like, goes through and punches Gorgon Maid into the wall. Eventually, we see that Gorgon Maid then uses her special finisher, and she's like, hey, let's consider it a gift, Nightmare Eye. And it's like, hey, it's a foolproof cheat skill. It requires eye contact to awaken a human's most deep-seated fear, and in turn, it'll grant you the human eternal peace of mind, right? As we see that Kyoka is sort of trapped in all of this, as we understand a little bit of her backstory, right? As she just thinks like, hey, everyone I have ever loved is dead, because we are all exorcists, right? And like, hey, that's why I'd given up on marriage. But this man here is different. We see that she has somebody who she's planning to marry in the moment. She's like, hey, but he's different. He doesn't know I'm an exorcist. We'll start a normal family, and I'll quit being an exorcist. And she's like, And then all of a sudden, we cut to a church burning and on fire, shattered in all of these various ways, as we see that Kyoka is standing on the ground with a wedding dress around her, and her soon-to-be husband, who is now dead, is laying here in her arms, right? We see that both Sasaki and Tsurugi both appear in a moment. It's like, hey, Kurogane, right? But eventually, we just see that she's like, hey, in the end, he ended up shielding me. He's not even an exorcist, but he protected me anyway, right? And we see from this point on, she decided to become a cross paladin. She's like, hey, I've abandoned any hope for ordinary happiness. I won't rely on anyone. I've got to do it alone. As we see in the moment, her soon-to-be husband pretty much hugs her on the back and says like, hey, you can rest now, Kyoka. As we see in the current world, Kyoka is just like in this nightmare realm, and Gorgon Maid is just like, oh, she may be a cross paladin, but she is still only human. She won't be waking up anytime soon. But of course, Kyoka in her sort of mind palace just says like, hey, don't blame yourself for any of this. Like, hey, all this is going on, but I still have to go. As we see that she wakes up, goes through, and punches Gorgon straight into the face, and she's like, hey, fear, I gave up on that a long time ago. I've decided that solitude is the only partner I need. And Gorgon is just like, hey, you're the first person to ever escape that. Good job. Gorgon also then uses their Gorgon Mayday augmented mode and pretty much turns into a massive snake. Kurogane uses her ability again, Gone Girl, 16 toll, white tiger, blue dragon blade, cuts off the head of this massive serpent, and Gorgon sort of just like looks back around at her, but of course Kyoka holds the sword behind her back, reflecting Gorgon's eye and turning Gorgon into a doll themselves. They fall to the ground. All the other people who are dolls sort of like reappear here in a moment, and Kyoka just says like, hey, you were a demon, but you were also afraid of me. Well, isn't that ironic? You ended up being number 1000, and that is where we end off this chapter on this really awesome note of like, man, good chapter, Bulma X's Kyoshi. What can I say? Like, I've never really been a fan of Kyoka, but I am a massive fan of her after this. That was really cool, and just the whole moment where she's like, hey, the only partner I need is solitude. I really very much like that, if you know what I'm saying, right? Next up is Akane Banashi with another masterclass of a chapter, really understanding everything about Shomei, right? The beginning of this chapter, we see that Hasho pretty much shows Akane a picture on his phone. Of course, she's timing Shomei, just says like, hey, I received this from Shomei years ago. You should examine it as he performs, right? And she's like, oh, thank you, Hasho, right? And she starts to look at it, and she starts to look at the clock in her hand, and pretty much she just says like, hey, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The first thing you should do is closely examine his performance to understand his true reason for refusing to train you, right? As we see that Shomei gets started on a story and just says like, hey, this story is about a word called shiwai. It carries the same meaning as a number of other words, such as skinflint, miser, tightwad, cheapskate, and curmudgeon. As he starts to go into more of the characters in the story and just says like, as one of the characters is like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Come in, my friend. He's like, oh, that's a nice folding fan you have. And there's another guy just is like, oh, you can tell, is it? Well, this was a present to me. And I'm thinking, like, I should be able to get 2 years out of it, right? And hey, I know what you're going to say. Usually, a single summer is enough to wear out a fan. So wait, here's my plan. I'll only open it halfway. Now, this way, this half the fan will last for a full year. And when this half wears out, hey, then I'll open the other half instead. So that makes 2 years. Smart thinking, am I right? And the other guy just goes like, well, that's rather cute. Let me see it. Fans are designed to be unfolded all the way. Only opening it halfway will actually damage the fan in the long run. You must open the fan completely. Then hold the fan upright before your face, but don't move the fan itself. And then move your face back and forth really fast as he just like goes back and forth, shaking his head like to be able to still get the use of the fan here in the moment. And all of the crowd is very much shocked about all of this as the guy just says like, hey, just wave your face, not the fan. And this way you can make it last 10 years. And everyone's like, hey, I'm not looking for that much longevity, right? As Akane pretty much just realizes all of this and just says like, oh, this story is Shiwaya, masters of the art of being excessively cheap. Trade humorous essences in an omnibus style, right? As we pretty much understand, this whole story is like a bunch of like an anthology of all of these various series going through. As we get a little bit of narration saying like, hey, the extravagant entrance, the purely unorthodox style. It is all designed to make the goofy eccentricity of the story stand out even more. And like, we just get more to understand like, hey, Master Shomei is the Rakugo world's premier comedian, right? As we see that Shomei is going through doing a whole bunch more of these stories, just going back and forth, just like doing the whole thing of the fan, like, would it really last that long? All of this various stuff, telling more of these stories. And we see that Akane is just like looking at the picture on Hosho's phone, but also checking the stopwatch and counting all of these various numbers, right? Shomei goes into a few more of these stories, and eventually Akane just says like, hey, I think I get it now, Master Hosho. Shomei's true nature is that of a craftsman. He's a precise, perfected script that he performs to exciting standards in the pursuit of the highest possible quality for his craft of Rakugo product, right? And we see that Tyson's also just like, hey, like, are you talking about like when he goes in and rakes in all of the laughs, right? As it shows us like, hey, he does raise a good point. Laughter is a fickle thing. Whether you get a burst of laughter depends not on the audience, but that is the key to the humorous kokeabashi, is having the flexibility to read the room and adjust accordingly, right? As Akane just says like, hey, so having a script perfectly set in stone is a drawback, if anything. No one would ever choose. As she hands the phone over to Tyson, as we see an image of what the image on the show's phone was. It was a precise script for Shomei's performance, right? As Shomei says like, hey, to have everything proceed exactly as planned according to Shomei's principles. A precise, extracting perspective, an ordinary attention to detail, the stillness of his heart. And most importantly, no amount of excitement from the audience can disturb. He only ever performs a perfect vision of his craft. He is the masterpiece of the Tsubayakawa school. The clockwork logician, Shomei Tsubakia. And that is where we end this chapter with this awesome 2-page spread, really fully introducing Shomei as we see this grandfather clock behind Shomei's. He's pretty much like holding his hand over his mouth. Akane Banashi, Shomei is just so cool. What can I just really say about any of this, right? Like I said, I sort of need to speed it up here a little bit, and next chapter is none other than Blue Box, and really this is a very simple chapter about like, hey, what if the past was different? And hey, what if Taiki ended up playing basketball at the end of the day? What if he got to interact with Chinatsu in all of these ways? And hey, at the end of the day, things would not have worked out as they sort of worked out now. We see in this sort of timeline that Taiki ends up joining the drama club and pretty much like puts off all of his practice and like doesn't even care about doing any of this stuff, right? And of course, that means Chinatsu is left in the gym all alone. Her father comes through, tells her that she needs to go back home and she has to leave, and she moves away abroad. As we pretty much just like understand a lot of this narration saying like, hey, there is no such thing as fate. You have no destined partner and no predetermined ending. Fate is just a romantic name to the coincidence after the fact. The road ahead hasn't been picked by fate, Putting it the other way around is fate in your own hands. We can choose the kind of future that we want to have. As we get this really nice message, as we see the Chinatsu just playing basketball in the moment, of course, how Taiki has influenced all of this. As the very end of the chapter is very simply, we just see that Akari and Hyodo are sort of doing some joint training together, and we see that Hyodo is just like, hey, I can't believe you called me out here at the end of the year. I guess it's the lessons that matter more than what month it is, right? You two still need to go to nationals, right? Both of you. As we see that both of the Yusa brothers are here, of course, both Haruto and the other Yusa brother, who I just always called him Yusa, so I can't really think of another name. But we see that two of them are seeking out lessons from Hyodo, which is like a little bit of a big deal. But like I said, just a really nice message of a chapter of Blue Box, and just incredibly good for sure, right? The elusive samurai really hits the nail on the head as far as like, hey, this is the end of Fubuki here in these moments, as this entire chapter is really dedicated to the end of Fubuki. Now, if you want to see that Tokiyuki and Fubuki are going back and forth, fighting with each other, doing all this various stuff, of course, Tokiyuki is using the Demon Heart Buddha Blade attack, and him and Fubuki are simply just going back and forth. And we get introduced to the Non-Bokujo Chag, Kanto Stoward, Kono Maruforu faction, Ashikaga clan, Kono Morifuyu, right? Really see what he's all about in this moment, just more back and forth fighting, until eventually we just see Tokiyuki just think like, hey, Fubuki and I continue to cross swords as if making up for lost time. Still, I didn't have his skill, but I longed for the moment when I first saw him, right? As you just see a lot of these moments that have just happened within the series and like everything that Fubuki is going towards here, we see that he is using his Saka Sakayo ability just over and over again, and Tokiyuki just reminiscing on all of these moments of like, hey, I like your tactics and your techniques and all of your teachings, like come back to us, Fubuki, right? And Fubuki is really just getting tired out here in a moment as he thinks back to his younger sister, and the two of them have this little conversation. He's like, hey, what happens if I rise to power, Rika? Like, will you come with me? And his sister's like, hey, I'll wait here for you. And Fubuki's like, hey, what are you talking about, right? Just is like, hey, without somewhere to return to for solace, you'll wear yourself out. And of course, Fubuki also remembers to the first time he'd really met Tokiyuki and all of the gang, and just all the time they spent together as part of the elusive warriors, and Fubuki being like, hey, eating all of his rice balls, and Tokiyuki's just saying like, hey, I will always rely on you. You're the first retainer I actually found by myself. And we see that Fubuki is coming in with a massive sword strike coming down to kill Tokiyuki, but pretty much falls short here in the moment, as Fubuki just cries and says like, oh, my lord, and Tokiyuki just says like, hey, welcome back, Fubuki, as we get this final page this final single page spread just saying like, hey, Non-Bokucho Tag, the elusive warriors, Fubuki, as we end the chapter of Tokiyuki just coming in and hugging Fubuki as it seems like he has met his end. A really nice and emotional chapter. The elusive samurai was a solid chapter this week for sure. That means we have one chapter less to talk about, and that is none other than Witch Watch. And as I said at the beginning of this video, Witch Watch has the magazine cover this week, and Witch Watch also just has a simply beautiful chapter, right? As of course, we open it up with a very nice color page as we see all of the members of the Otogi householders who are like hanging out around this really fancy couch. We see that all of the guys are sort of sitting there around the edge, right? Of course, this is Keigo, Miharu, Kanchi, Morito. We also see that Bon is part of all of this, and Nico is sitting on the couch, and they are all eating some nice, good old ice cream, right? And this chapter is titled Hybrid Rainbow, right? Well, the beginning of the chapter, it's just all of the guys arguing with each other, right? Like, Morito's like, hey, whose decorative plant is this? Is this yours, Keigo, right? Like, don't leave it sitting out here. Keigo's like, hey, Kanchi, when you borrow my manga, you always break the spines. Like, be more considerate, all right? Kanchi's like, hey, Miharu, how long were you going to sleep in this morning? Like, what happened to our plan to hang out this morning, right? And Miharu's like, hey, Morito, there's spinach in my bento lunch yesterday. Like, I asked you not to do that, and you said you wouldn't, right? We see that all of them are just, like, getting in a bunch of, like, big fights with each other, and eventually, they have just gone completely silent talking with each other, right? We see that Kanchi is laying on the couch, and Keigo is pretty much sitting in front of it on his phone, and Kanchi accidentally bumps into Keigo's back, and Keigo's like, hey, excuse me, like, would you quit bumping into me with your knee over here, like, I think you owe me an apology, right? Like, we really just see that tensions are running very high, and we just get this back and forth banter for like 2 or 3 more pages, until eventually we see that Nico ends up coming home with both Bon and Chami, right? And we pretty much see like, hey everyone, Chami's here, and of course there's a nasty aura in the room, as she's like, hey, is everything okay? Like, it looks like you guys got into a massive fight, right? A bunch of comedy about all of this various stuff, and of course, Slump is here to sort of understand what's going on, as like, Morito pretty much just like coughs to himself, right, and he's like, we all see there's a bunch of masking tape on the ground, and we see that Slump goes over to see what Morito is saying, and pretty much relays the information like, hey, he says that this is my house, but they've stolen chunks of it for themselves. This is unlawful possession of real estate, right? And Chami's like, what does that mean? Like, say it for yourself, Morito, right? But at the end of the day, we just see they are, like, all getting super very alarmed with each other, right? So they're just, like, going, like, really just going back and forth and all of this. And eventually, Nico's like, oh, I know what to do about this. I've got to just dispel. And all of the guys are just, like, twitching and, like, they don't want to say anything because, like, they think they're going to, like, lose pretty much the war here if they say anything. But they're all very much scared of what Nico's about to do, right? And I really love how Chami's like, yeah, they're all terrified, but they don't want to say anything because they don't want to look uncool in front of each other, right? As we see that Nico uses the spell Paintication, right? As she pretty much was like, hey, okay, now here's my hand, and she raised her hand in the sky, and she makes a little bit of some paint that's just floating in the air, right? As Nico explains, like, hey, cast a spell on a body part, and you can write on the air. The writing solidifies and hangs there in the air for a while, and so if you do this and color it all in, look at that, you can make a wall. As we see that all of the men of the Otogiya household are pretty much just like sitting on the couch with these big partitions in between of each other, right? And they're pretty much like all very much uncomfortable with all of this various stuff. And we see that eventually Chami and Nico end up going to Nico's room to hang out a little bit, right? And eventually they're all just like, hey, I wish this fight was over. Like, what are we really doing here? And like, hey, I can't even break this awkward silence. Like, these walls made it even worse. Like, what even the hell is this, right? Like, the only sound in this room is everybody clearing their own throats. And I bet they all feel the same, like, hey, damn it. Like, I can't take any more of this. Like, we need to do something. Like, if anybody says anything, I promise I'll respond. I'm prepared to sound happy and cheerful, right? And Keigo's, of course, on his phone. And he gets a text from Nimue as he just hops up and says, like, guys, we have to talk. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, let's talk with each other, right? As Keigo pretty much explains, like, hey, Nimue just texted me. It was about her grandma. She is so old that she doesn't have the power for it anymore, but she was a shapeshifter witch at some point, too. But at this point, she's too frail to do much else, so the only thing she had to look forward to every day was doting on her cat, Leonard. Well, Leonard passed away yesterday, right? As we see that Nimue went over to go see her grandma, and her grandma just said, like, hey, here when I and Leonard were together, we always talk to each other, and they say that whenever a pet passes, they cross the rainbow bridge. But poor Leonard wasn't all that steady on his feet, and I'm starting to worry that he won't make it all the way across. And that when it's my time to go, he won't be on the other side of the bridge for me, right? As we see it, this has pretty much been a call to action for all of the Otogi household, including Chami also, right? As eventually, we see that they all go to one of the local waterways, right? As we see that they've also invited Nimue's grandmother and mom over, and it's like, hey, there's Nimue's grandma, I can see her from here, right? And Keigo's like, hey, so are you sure this will work, Nico? And Nico just says, like, yes, I'll can't paint it on our whole bodies. We can also pick whatever colors we want, too. The problem is the flywing spell. I set up a barrier stretching across the river, but whether we can all move in sync or not is sort of on the table, right? But Morito just says, like, hey, listen, everybody, we can't practice this. We get one shot, and really, that's it. But I know we can do it. As he just says, like, hey, we're all totally different people. We're all our own color, so to speak. But when we all come together, we're invincible. As we see everybody just joins hands with each other, they all get this spell cast on themselves. And of course, the 7 members here do the 7 colors of the rainbow and fly across the sky over this bridge here in the moment. And we see that Nimue's grandmother sees this, just like, oh my, look at all of that. Nimue transforms into a cat and then climbs over the rainbow bridge. And we see that Nimue's grandmother just goes like, oh, look, there he is. He's crossing the bridge. Oh, thank goodness, it looks like Leonard made it alright. I feel much better now. Wait for me on the other side. Okay, Leonard? And the very end of the chapters, everybody just being like, all so happy. Nimu's like, hey, Nico, thank you so very much. He's like, hey, sure thing. Just is like, hey, thank you, everyone. That was some real awesome theme work, right? And eventually Morito goes and just starts to clear his breath, and all of the other guys do too, right? And Nimu's like, hey, what's wrong? Why is everybody coughing all of a sudden, right? And we pretty much see that Nico's just like, oh, they're all just saying like, hey, I'm sorry about earlier, and okay, right? And she's like, why did they just say so? And it's like, hey, the Otogi house boys are just so awkward. And that is where we end this chapter of Witch Watch, and I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it. Witch Watch was the chapter of the week. There is no way we are possibly getting around that. Did you guys just see the same chapter that I just read? That was just so nice and cute, and just every single little part of it just made me so happy on the inside. So yeah, with all that out of the way, let's just go ahead and rank the rest of the chapters at this point. Like I said, Witch Watch was just a purely amazing chapter, one that I loved all the way through. Starting also from the bottom, let's just go and put, as normal, we're going to just go and copy over Astro Royale, put Kill Blue right above it, and honestly, we're probably going to put Hima 10 right above that one, and then we'll follow it up with the Elusive Samurai. I just really love the finality of the moment that we get with Fubuki here, and as much as like he was one of the first parts of this series, he was one of the original few Elusive Warriors, and seeing him come to his end has really sort of brought a lot of this series that a lot of the parts I really enjoyed about this series full circle, so I definitely liked that moment. Alright, what is going next after Witch Watch? Honestly, I think I want to put Sidcraft next because I just simply really like that chapter. Akane Banashi was another excellent one. We'll follow it up with a Kagurabachi. Put a Ichi the Witch next, followed by a Ulti X-Row, if I could spell that. Yeah, I did spell that right. I'm a little impressed, right? Kiyoshi after that. Alright, I know it's going in like a lot of the... I didn't even spell the in Ichi, which right, I spelled it the, right? Alright, let's go through, delete all of these, and that should lead us with, yes, 4 series, One Piece, Embers, and Star of Beethoven. Honestly, I've got to put Star of Beethoven next. I laughed way too hard at that chapter to have it any other way, so Star of Beethoven. We'll put Blue Box next. Another just excellent chapter. Really just deep and emotional. One Piece we'll put on the bottom right above Piece, and then we'll put Embers in between MBRs. Alright, there we go. So again, the final ranking is Witch Watch, Sidcraft, Akane Banashi, Kagurabachi, Ichi the Witch, Ultimate X's Kyoshi, Star of Beethoven, Blue Box, Embers, One Piece, The Elusive Samurai, Hima 10, Kill Blue, and Astro Royale. And as far as the character for the week, I honestly, who do I want to pick here? I really liked Lulu in Sidcraft this week. Akane Banashi, how do you spell it? Shomei. Yeah, Shomei was a really awesome character. Honestly, Samura had a lot of really good moments in Kagurabachi, that real deep emotional stuff. I don't really think there's anybody from Ichi the Witch. Definitely Kyoka was looking really cool. And for the rest of the chapters, I really don't think there's anybody. So yeah, so we have, if I could spell, Kyoka from Ultimate X's Kyoshi, Samura from Kagurabachi, Shomei, and Lulu from Sidcraft. Out of all the characters that I really had a reaction to this week, I definitely think it's probably going to have to be Shomei, because, like, hey, he just really showed what he was made of as, like, the best comedian here in the Rakugo world. Like, it was just a really cool reveal. So, yeah, we're going to pick Shomei as the character of the week. And hey, with all that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 18 of 2025. And let me check OBS here. Yeah, I've been recording for an hour and 4 minutes. Probably, like, maybe 4 or, like, 3 minutes will have to be cut out of this. So it's going to be over an hour video. I don't like to do these for Weekly Shonen Jump videos, but there's just so much good to talk about manga this week, I sort of just had to, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, great issue of manga this week, and hey, if you guys like this video, I've talked about Weekly Shonen Jump a good number of times here on the channel. I think we're getting up to, like, the 40th review, if we're not already there at this point, because I know I've done this, like I said, a good amount of times. With that, I'll also be talking about issue number 19 of Weekly Shonen Jump next week, so be expecting that. And hey, if you want to see more of this playlist, I'll have the playlist linked not only down in the description down below, but also on the end card of this video. And hey, if you guys are listening to this on YouTube, just know I put it up on podcasting platforms, and vice versa. If you're listening to this on podcasting platforms, I do this stuff on YouTube. So yeah, with all of that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching. Again, this was issue number 18 of 2025 of Weekly Shonen Jump. A great issue of Witch Watch, Sid Craft, and Akane Banashi taking my top 3 spots, and of course, Hima Kill, Blue, and Asteria taking up the bottom few, and all of the other great series in between. I will see you guys next time for issue number 19 of 2025, and until then, I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.